How can we offer more personalized professional development? What would that look like? How do I connect my professional development with our quality standards? What would that look like for me instead of attending one professional development that covers the whole district? What are some of the most impactful teaching methods? How do we share those? How do we identify what they are? How do we learn from each other? How do we connect what we need into the higher ed and the teacher prep programs? How can we better provide for and inform prep programs? Is our system currently aligned? Probably not to the degree we would like it. So how can a data system really drive information, not only at the K-12 system, but higher ed? How can we provide more meaningful support for teachers? How do we learn from all this data? What we're seeing even statewide, what do our teachers need? What do our teachers need at a state level, district level, and an individual school level? And how do we create school-based leadership opportunities for teachers? The Teacher-Student Data Link Project supports continuous improvement of instruction and student achievement. So again, you're looking at the major 4 components. I'm going to go over those. Toby, you're going to cover them in detail. Educator of record. Who is that? How do we define it? This, we talked earlier about the bill where every teacher will have a unique identifier number. How do we have roster verification? What does that look like? How do we look at codes? And in the bottom one, how do we have a standard course code across the state? These are major components that really are going to drive this whole system. So Toby will really give us more detail about those 4 components and what they look like.
So the educator of record definition is really interesting because it's individuals who have been assigned primary responsibility for a student's learning. And then we also have another little facet called a contributing professional. So it's who contributes to it. Do any of you have your own personal children at home? Like, you could think of this like who gets the responsibility for the mess, right? Like whoever was in charge while you were gone is like the person at the top, but the little brother or sister contributed in some way. And sometimes if you reward or punish either of them, you could do it incorrectly, which causes some mistrust in your system. So it's really important to understand how this the educator of record definition works out, and for us to try it out and play it out so that we can know how the different pieces of data interact with these 2 types of educators. Next is the educator identifier. So again, we've talked about this a few times. You know, you hate to think of yourself as a number, right? But with this, in this age of identity theft and things like that, like you have a social security number, you protect it. When you go and apply for credit, you'd like to use Bill Gates' social security number, but you can't, right? You have your own unique identifier. We have to make sure that we always use that. We're finding out that a lot of districts don't tell new teachers what your educator identifier number is, but they are going to start. Next. Next is roster. Great. Next is roster verification. This is so interesting because it's like with your kids at home, like the one with the fingerprints on the jar of cookies, right? Like that's an easy way to see who did it. Okay, but you don't really do that all the time in everything that you think about. With roster verification, it allows you to like go in and see all the kids that are linked to you. So if you see that, you know, the first kid on the list, yeah, I actually know him. He was in my first period class and he attended regularly. Okay, great. Second kid on the list, who's that? Why are they on my list? It could be that they registered, never came to the school. It could be that they registered and they had a schedule change in the first day and the student information system was just never updated. So there's this like a section where teachers can ensure that there's accurate links between there so that, I mean, I know that there's going to be a tendency, like nobody wants Toby on their roster, right? Because the only award he ever won was perfect attendance. But we together as a group of professionals owe it to the teachers and to ourselves to make sure that this data is actually representative of what's happening. And the roster verification helps that. Then we go to standard course codes. As I listen to you to introduce yourselves in the introduction that the people on the video aren't going to get to see, obviously, but I heard that some of you teach math, right? Like I know that you teach math. But you probably teach a specific type of math in the high school. Maybe you teach Algebra 1, okay? Well, if you teach Algebra 1 and a student transfers to you and they have Algebra 1 on their transcript, shouldn't it be reasonable that they come into you having experienced some Algebra 1 instruction? The thing about it is that in Colorado we have so much local flexibility that sometimes Algebra 1 in the same school looks different from section to section or teacher to teacher. So it's really, really important to see how these things all line up and think about those common or those standard course codes so that when we say that somebody's in Algebra 1 and it's on their transcript, we can be reasonably sure that they participated in an Algebra 1 course and demonstrated mastery of Algebra 1 standards. So there's a lot of questions about what the Department of Education will do with this data. So we are authorized to do these things at the top. Provide educator effectiveness data to preparation programs. In other words, tell prep programs how their graduates are doing on effectiveness so that they can say, oh, maybe we need to prepare our people differently because they're being rated differentially in these certain areas. Do some research around pockets where certain types of kids are demonstrating tremendous growth. Okay, wow, we've seen that in this district, kids that are ELL are actually outperforming the gifted learners in the state. What's going on there? Are they implementing a program? Are they implementing a curriculum? What's happening there that we can investigate so that we can possibly replicate it so that all the kids that are fit into that category can do better? Again, but our job is to protect data. We don't think that it's appropriate for private information to be put out, and we have a responsibility and an obligation to protect it so that people aren't harmed if the wrong type of information gets out there. And then this one here, how do we deploy the resources? I always talk about this. Have any of you ever been taught to do something that you already know how to do? Like by your spouse or something? I mean, usually that's when it happens. It's like, just leave me alone. I've sat through enough of these in-services on this. I do fine. But we do it all the time as a state agency, right? Oh, here we come. We know. Boo. What if we could deploy our resources in a more targeted fashion so that we could identify where the needs were and then meet the needs rather than just make assumptions that everybody in a region needs everything that everybody in every other region needs. Although you guys are doing that in your classrooms every day, hopefully, differentiating the instruction based on the needs of the kids. This bottom section are what your districts can do with the teacher-student data link. There's a very important distinction here between what the state can do and what the districts can do. Districts can do the same thing we do in providing differential support. They can use this information to help you personalize classroom instruction. And then they can also use this data to inform their staffing and evaluation decisions. That's a local decision. They can also identify and deploy district resources. So a lot of them are similar, but the state doesn't do this part, and they also have to protect student information. So there's a couple things that are on both of those. So you might be interested to know which districts are participating in the teacher-student data link pilot. This is I want to call it an initial list, because we think we're going to have many, many more districts going on the pilot because of the roster verification and because of some of those other elements. But you can see where they are in the state. Cheyenne Mountain, Denver, Durango, East Grand, Garlic, Hanover, Harrison, Jefferson, Levita, Whitefield, and Well. There's still a lot more that are thinking about it. We want to hear from you some of your concerns so that when we're doing the pilot, we can implement some of the feedback or some of the protections that you guys talked about. So here's the timeline. Here we are in 2011, identifying pilot districts, check. We have gone to EDAC and had do you guys know what EDAC is? So there's this little committee called the Educational Data, just escaped my mind, Advisory. Is it up there? Maybe I should just read the slide. They are in statute to protect districts against burdens and inappropriate types of collections, without any authorizations. Educator record and contributing professional definitions are done. Standard course code system approved. Okay, so now here we are in September of 2012. We're requesting specific information from pilots, and we're getting some feedback from you. November, roster verification system pilot begins. Here we go. You guys can read slides, right? But when we think about this, we're thinking about May of 2013, having everybody have their courses mapped in, and then in September of 2013, start collecting the teacher-student data link data so we can do all those things that are kind of like the pie-in-the-sky dream of what a connected, integrated education system can deliver.